Today we will be reciting on the second part of Ram Katha Raswahini Part 1. The role of sages in royal courts. On one occasion, Emperor Parikshit fell at the feet of sage Sukha and asked for instruction on a point that was causing him dire doubt. Master, one riddle has been worrying me for a very long time. I know that you can solve it for me and no one else can. I have listened on the narratives of the lives of my forefathers, from the earliest, the great Manu, down to those of my grandfathers and father. I have studied these stories with care. I observe that in the history of each one of these there is a mention of rishis attached to the monarch. Some learned scholars, state saints who are members of the court, attending court sessions and sharing the business of government. These scholars have renounced all attachment and desires and have realized that world is a shadow and a snare, that one is the only reality. What is the real meaning of this amazing association of scholars with kings and rulers playing subordinate roles and being counseled? I know that the revered elders won't engage in any activity without sufficient and proper reasons. Their behavior is ever pure and unsullied, but this makes my doubt unsolvable. Please enlighten me. Sukha smiled. He said, You asked a fine question, no doubt. Listen, the great sages and holy scholars are always keen to share with their fellow people the truth they have grasped, the sanctity or the sanctifying experiences they have won, the elevating deeds they have been privileged to perform, and the divine grace that have been chosen to receive. They seek nearness to those who are in charge of administration and those who are adepts in dealing over people with the intention to use them as instruments for establishing and ensuring peace and prosperity on earth. They implant high ideals in their mind and holy ways of fulfilling them. They prompt the performance of righteous actions in accordance with just laws. The monarchs invite and welcome the sages, seek out the scholars, and plead with them to be in their court so that they learn from the art of government and act according to their counsel. The monarch was the master and guardian of people, so the sages spent their days with him for the estimable purpose of realizing through him the yearning of their hearts. May all the worlds be happy. Samasta loka sukhino bhavantu. The sages were eager to see happiness and peace spread all over the world. Therefore, they tried to equip the kings with all the virtues, fill them with the moral codes of discipline, arm them with branches of learning, so that they may rule efficiently, wisely, and with beneficial consequences to themselves and their subjects. There were other reasons too. Listen, the sages knew that granter of joy to humanity, the mentor of human morals, the leader of the solar line, the dweller in the heaven of eternal bliss, will take birth in royal line. The sages, with foresight to anticipate events, gained entry into the courts of rulers so that they might experience the bliss of contact with the incarnation when it happens. They feared they might not get such access later. They might miss the bliss that they could well garner. So they profited by their vision of the future and established themselves in the royal capital in the thick of the community, longing for the advent. To this venerable group belonged Vasishtha, Vishwamitra, Gargi, Agastya, and other rishis. Monarchs of renunciation. They had no wants, sought nothing from anyone, and were ever content. They appeared in the audience hall of the emperors, not for pomp or of panditry, or to collect the costly gifts ordered to such disputants and guests, or to decorate themselves with the burdensome title those patrons conferred on people they preferred. They craved rather than bliss of the vision of the Lord, and for a chance to uphold dharma in human affairs, they had no other objective. The kings were also immersed in divine thoughts in those days. They approached the hermits and sages in their retreats in order to discover from them the means of making their subjects happy and content. Often they invited them to their palaces, consulted them about the means of good governance. In those days, there were sages with no attachment to self and scholars with no craving for power. Such were the people who tendered advice to the kings. As a consequence, there was no lack of food, clothing, housing, or good health for the people of the realm. All days were festival days. All doors were decorated with green festoons. The rulers felt that his most sacred duty was to foster his people's welfare. The subject also felt that the ruler was the heart of the body politics. They had full faith that he was as precious as their own hearts, and they valued him very much. They revered him and paid him homage of gratitude. Sukha explained the role of the sages in the royal courts in this clear, downright manner before the large gathering that was sitting around him. Rama's story is the story of the universe. Have you ever noticed that whatever is done by the great, whichever company they choose, they will always be on the path of righteousness? Their acts will promote the welfare of the entire world. So, when the Ramayana or other narratives of the divine are recited or read, attention must be fixed on the majesty and mystery of God, on the truth and straightforwardness that are inherent in them, and on the practice of those qualities in our daily life. No importance should be attached to extraneous matters. The means and manner of the execution of one's duty is the paramount lesson to be learned. God, when appearing with form for the sake of upholding Dharma, behaves in a human way. He must, for he has to fold truth, the ideal life before people, and confer the experience of joy and peace on people. His playful activities might appear ordinary and commonplace to some eyes, but each will be an expression of beauty, truth, goodness, joy, and exaltation. Each will captivate the world with its charm and purify the heart that contemplates it. Each will overcome and overwhelm all the agitations of the mind, tear the veil of illusion, and fill the consciousness with sweetness. There can be nothing ordinary and commonplace in the careers of the avatars. What is seen and is taken of that nature is really superhuman, supernatural, deserving high reverence. Story of Ram is not the story of an individual, it is the story of the universe. Ram is the personification of the basic universal in all beings. He is in all for all time, in all space. The story does not deal with the period that is past, but with the present and future, with the end, with beginless eternal time. No ant can bite without Ram's will. No leaf can drop from its branch without Ram's prompting. Sky, wind, fire, earth, water, the five elements that compose the universe, behave as they do for fear of him and work in time with his orders. Rama is the principle that attracts the disparate elements in nature and endures through that attraction. The traction that one exerts over another is what makes the universe exist and function. This is the Rama principle, without which the cosmos would become chaos, hence the axiom. Without Rama, there would be no panorama or the universe. Thus ends the chapter 1.